Etta Mae Whitfield served the Whitfield family their Thanksgiving feast in 1857. By sunrise, every one of them was dead, and the only thing left warm in that house was the food. On Thanksgiving night, 1857, in a decaying mansion outside Colleton County, 8 members of the Whitfield family sat down to a meal they would never finish. By dawn, the candles were still burning. The food remained untouched, and every chair was empty, save for one. The story was buried, rewritten, and then erased. But the old plantation still stands, and some say the air around it still smells faintly of copper and clove. What happened in that dining room was not a haunting. It was something worse, a reckoning born from silence, obedience, and centuries of unspoken cruelty. The Whitfield estate was built on low country soil, where the marsh fog curls around cypress roots like memory refusing to die. Colonel Edwin Whitfield inherited it after his father's death, along with 27 enslaved people, including a woman named Etta Mae, who worked in the kitchen. Etta had been there since she was 8. She knew the house better than anyone, its breath, its decay, its rhythm. The walls creaked like they remembered screams. At night, she could hear the faint sound of piano keys from the locked parlor, though no one had played since Miss Clara's death 5 years prior. Thanksgiving had come late that year. The war had not yet begun, but something darker was already in the air. The Whitfields, eager to preserve civility amid decline, gathered at a long oak table. Turkey, cornbread, and persimmon pudding steamed beneath the golden light. They spoke of politics, cotton yields, and God's favor, everything except guilt. Every bite was a ritual of denial. Etta served them one by one, her eyes downcast. She did not tremble. She did not smile. She only whispered, almost to herself, "Ain't no blessing in stolen bread." Outside, the swamp buzzed with crickets and the faint hum of thunder. Inside, the family toasted to prosperity. But beneath the tablecloth, Etta's hands were trembling, not from fear but from memory. 3 days earlier, she had been forced to wash the floors of the whipping shed. Her son, Josiah, age 9, had been punished for taking an apple. The colonel said mercy was weakness. Etta scrubbed until the boards bled through the soap. Something in her broke, quietly, without sound, like a glass dropped into soft dirt. In the kitchen, Etta reached for a small jar hidden behind the flour sack. It contained crushed roots, bitter leaves, and dust scraped from an old stone by the river. She'd learned the mixture from her grandmother, medicine for fevers or something stronger depending on the dose. As she stirred it into the gravy, her reflection in the pot looked back at her. Not angry, not afraid, just tired. She whispered to that reflection, "You ain't killing 'em, baby. You just stoppin' what done already died." Colonel Whitfield raised his glass. "To the Lord's bounty and to the Whitfield name enduring another year." The guests repeated the toast. Laughter flickered through the room like candlelight, warm but fragile. Etta stood by the wall, watching them swallow the first mouthfuls. One by one, forks paused in midair. One by one, their words slurred, their eyes unfocused. For a moment, the room was silent, eerily polite. Then the eldest son fell forward, face first, into his plate. By morning, 8 bodies lay slumped around the table. The turkey was half-carved, the pie untouched. The colonel's hand still gripped his fork. No one screamed. No one called for help. Etta sat in the corner until the fire died out, staring at the smoke twisting toward the rafters. Outside, the fog thickened. The dogs did not bark. The plantation, for the first time in decades, was quiet. Truly quiet. When the overseer entered at dawn, he found her sitting there, motionless, her apron clean. "They gone," she said softly before he could ask. He backed away, muttering prayers. By noon, riders from town arrived. They found the house heavy with silence and Etta kneeling before the table. She didn't resist arrest. She didn't speak again for 6 days. When asked why, she finally replied, "Because the Lord ain't come, so I did his work for him." The trial was brief. Newspapers printed her name once, then stopped. She was found guilty of 8 counts of murder and sentenced to hang, but the local pastor refused to officiate, saying her soul was beyond salvation. Yet every night before her execution, he heard a woman singing from the jailhouse cellar, a low, trembling hymn about deliverance sung in a language older than the county itself. On the morning of her hanging, Etta looked up at the gray sky. Witnesses said she smiled, not from joy, but from knowing something the rest did not. Her last words were simple. Maybe now the land can breathe. When the trapdoor opened, thunder cracked above the gallows, though the sky was clear. Within a year, the Whitfield plantation fell into ruin. The fields went barren, livestock sickened, and the river changed its course. Locals said the soil had turned against its masters. The house was abandoned, left to rot beneath the weight of its own history. By 1863, it was used as a Confederate infirmary. Soldiers reported strange dreams, visions of a woman stirring a pot that never boiled, whispering words they couldn't understand. County archives from that period show something odd. Every mention of the Whitfield name disappears after 1860. Pages torn, ledgers missing. One surviving document notes a domestic disturbance of unusual nature. No burial records were ever found for Etta Mae or the 8 Whitfields. Some say their bodies were burned together to cleanse the land, but the ashes never cooled right. Rain steamed for 3 days. In 1912, a new owner tried to rebuild. Workers refused to enter the dining room. They claimed to hear whispering, 8 distinct voices arguing over grace. The foreman said the air was thick, like breath after confession. He lasted 2 weeks before he left, saying only, "That house remembers being fed." A historian named Helen Grafton visited in 1931, researching Southern domestic tragedies. Her diary, discovered years later, describes finding a blackened spoon fused to the wood floor. On her final night, she wrote, "I dreamt of a woman by the hearth. She looked at me and said, 'They finally tasted it.'" Helen never returned to Charleston. Her body was found in her hotel room clutching that same spoon. Locals began calling the place Thanksgiving Hollow. Children dared each other to step inside. No one ever made it past the dining hall. Elders whispered that if you stay silent long enough, you can still hear the clink of cutlery, and a woman humming to herself, satisfied but not at peace. History does not lose what it wants to forget. It buries it. The Whitfields were not monsters, they were mirrors. Their house stood for a country built on obedience and denial. Etta's crime was not in her hands, but in her memory. Every wound turned inward until it found release. A century later, a field recording surfaced at the University of South Carolina. A woman, age unknown, sings an unbroken verse in an extinct dialect of Gullah. Translated, it means, "The bread they took, I took back." No one knows who the singer was. The audio degrades halfway through, ending in the sound of distant thunder. In 1950, developers uncovered bones beneath the old foundation, 9 bodies, all intertwined. No markers, no names, just rusted cutlery beside them and a small glass jar sealed with pitch. Inside, dust the color of river clay. The coroner sealed the report, calling it historical contamination. But the workers quit the next day. They said the ground was breathing. Today the house is gone. A field of reeds and wild garlic stands where the table once sat. But hunters say they still smell roasted meat there in late November. Some refuse to look toward the tree line after dusk, afraid they'll see the flicker of candles and hear a voice asking softly, "Ain't you gonna eat?" Etta Mae Whitfield. No record of birth, no record of death. Only the memory of a supper no one finished. We call it horror because it helps us sleep, but sometimes horror is justice that took too long to arrive.